Well, I am excited because we are on week 4 of our church-wide study, and it's been called the Red Letter Challenge. It's called the Red Letter Challenge because when you look in the Bible, the words written in red are the words of Jesus. And we've been focusing on the words of Jesus because our desire is to look more like Jesus. And I'll tell you, since this study came from another church, it wasn't our creation, I can readily admit to you that it has looked different than what I had planned. But here's what I love. Is that different or not, what we're hearing is we're hearing from people of how God is working through this. And I know personally from the community group that my wife and I are in, I have loved it because it has created space for some incredible conversations where I think we're growing in our appreciation and love for Jesus, but not just that, our appreciation and love for each other. And to me, I love that. And I'll tell you, I said I was going to talk to our online people. This series and this study has kind of reminded me of something I forget. And I feel bad, I'll admit it. We always say we welcome our online people. We're glad that you're joining us. You can see us, but I can't see you. We can't see you. So lots of times we forget, or I forget about our online people. And I'm sorry, and what I've loved is in this study, we've had our online people show up in the office and say, hey, we're here. Can we get a booklet? We're doing this. I got to see a guy and a family that I've been praying for about a couple months that had called into our church. I'd never met him, never seen him, but we got to pray with them. And when they showed up, I got to hear about how God's using that prayer and how he's moving in their lives. And I just want to say we are thankful for our online people. And we're glad that we are getting, even if we don't see you, that we're all still moving in the same direction. So I just want to say thank you. And whether it's, I think of Steve and Carol and Carolyn and Judith and Sue, all kinds of people who I know are watching online. Good morning. We're glad you're here. So there, and all of you that I just ignored, forgive me. But let's get back. Whether you are online or in person, for the last 2 weeks, we've been looking at 2 different principles that we see consistently interwoven through the teachings of Jesus, okay? And those 2 things that we've looked at over the last 2 weeks are, one, the presence of God, and intentionally doing things to put ourselves in the presence of God, and then the other is the forgiveness of God, and not only receiving that and experiencing that, but then sharing it with others, okay? And this morning, we're going to talk about a 3rd principle, and it is serving. And as we do that, I want to start by asking you a question. And here is the question. Which is more important, serving others or the heart with which you do it? Think about that. Which is more important, serving others or the heart with which you do it? Okay? Are they equally important? Is one more important than the other? And I think of a situation like you see someone who has a need, you go, you serve them, you fill that need, but your heart's not really in it. Does it matter? I would bet there are people who say, do you know what, it doesn't matter. As long as that person has their need met, hey, more power to you, that's awesome. I have others who'd say, no, don't you dare engage in helping them without your heart being in it, because they will know that you're not really there and you're not really for them. And I can see both of those perspectives, but I'll tell you, I believe the condition of our heart matters. And I think it makes a serious difference in how we serve. So I want to share a story that explains that a little bit, okay? And I'll tell you, I can't remember, I think I told the story 2 or 3 years ago, but what I've learned about you all is after a year and a half, it's gone. So I'm going to share a story again, and this one you might remember a portion of it, okay? But it serves a purpose, and I think it's going to help us to dial in on the fact of the condition of our hearts when we serve. Okay? Comes from my junior high years. I've said it over and over. I was loud. I was busy. I like to think that I was good-hearted. But one of the things about my childhood, and maybe still a little bit as an adult today, is if I see a spot where I can maybe push the borders and the fringes and the edge a little bit, I'll do it. And I remember one day when I saw that opportunity. Okay? I was reading through this magazine. My parents had ordered this Christian magazine that was geared towards teenagers, and I was actually reading it. And in it, I saw an article that if you process worms correctly, that they are actually just pure protein, and they're actually healthy. And so as a teenage kid, I'm like, I got this one, okay? So I called my buddy Pete, because we lived in a neighborhood where there was about 8 of us who kind of ran around and did stuff, and Pete was my closest friend. So I called Pete, I said, I got a great idea. So Pete came over, we went in our backyard and dug up about 10 to 15 really big earthworms, and then we took them inside. I think it was about at that point that my mom found me and was like, what are you doing washing worms in my sink? And at that point, I'm like, oh, Mom, remember that magazine you bought me, that Christian magazine? I did my best sales job. I said, worms are pure protein. They're really good as long as you process them right. And, out of the goodness of my heart, I want to help make people healthier. And so I just really think it'd be good if we made some worm cookies. And so I did my best sales job, and probably against her better wisdom, she made me promise that as long as people wanted those worm cookies, I could make them. And so Pete and I promised, and then we set about our work. And don't tell PETA, but we boiled the worms live. I don't know how to put them out of their misery, but so we boiled them whole, and then we rinsed them off, and then we diced them up, boiled them 2 more times. They're clean, they're everything. We mix up this beautiful batch of chocolate chip cookies, and then we stir in our little morsels of worms, okay? Now what you need to know is my mom is an amazing baker. And it's like, as a kid, it was awesome because I could trade the things that she baked for lots of things at lunchtime, okay? Because people loved what she made. So Pete and I used that, and what we knew is our buddies were all together, but we just called 1 or 2 of them, and we said, hey, we got something new that we're trying, but don't tell our other friends because we don't have enough for everybody, okay? We knew they were all together, and we knew they'd all show up, but we created this sense of scarcity. So they all show up at the door, they come on in, you smell the chocolate chip cookies going through, and we're like, oh, we don't have enough for everybody, and kind of our best Tom Sawyer of like, can I please paint the fence? And so we just say, well, okay, everybody can have one, okay, but we don't have a lot. So we give them all a cookie. And we're like, there's something special, and you got to tell us what's in it. So they take a bite, and they're like, well, it just tastes like a chocolate chip cookie. And we're thinking, well, maybe they didn't get a bite, so take another bite. They take another bite. And before they can even chew it up, we both just start yelling, it's worms! And half of them start laughing. Half of them aren't so sure, but one kid, his name was Greg, he just starts sprinting to the bathroom. And he spits out what's in his mouth, and there's a chunk of worm about the size of my little fingernail. And as he sees it, he starts gagging, or some might call it vomiting, in the toilet. And lo and behold, I was in junior high heaven, okay? And it's because I got just what I wanted. And before I got in trouble, I will admit, I took the remainder of those cookies to my junior high the next day, shared them with a whole other batch of friends, and if you ever wondered why I was an assistant principal to junior high, that's why. I was one of them, okay? But here's the point. You tell me, did the condition of my heart affect how I served those people? Do you think it did? I would say it did, okay? Because here's what it was. In my junior high mind, it was great. I was serving my friends, and I was serving something that they literally said they wanted. But I wasn't doing it with the right heart, okay? Because really, I wasn't worried about serving them. What I wanted to see their face after I'd fed them worms. I was more about what my heart wanted than the ones that I said I was actually serving. And that's something I want us to look at today. Because today we're going to talk about serving and about service, but we can't do that without looking at the condition of our heart. Because if we just talk about serving and we don't look at the condition of our heart, our service won't be right. And I can say that because as you read through the Bible and the words of Jesus talk about the condition of our hearts over and over and over. If you have a Bible or an app, you can pull it out. We're going to be turning to Mark chapter 7, verses 6 through 7. That's where we're going to start today. And when we're picking up, Jesus is around the Pharisees and some teachers of the religious laws, okay? And these are like the spiritually elite of their time. They're the ones that everybody looked to. And they're like, how do you seek after God? Well, look to those guys. They do it really well. And these people were getting after Jesus because they're like, hey, your disciples don't follow all these rituals that we follow. They don't follow all these things that we're teaching you have to do if you want to seek after God. Why aren't you doing it? And what they were talking about specifically was this hand-washing ceremony. And when that hand-washing ceremony first started, it was probably started as a means to help people follow the Jewish law. Okay? It started with the intent of helping people to seek after God, to be people after his own heart. But by this time in history, that's not how it was being used anymore. Now it was being used by the Pharisees as a way of justifying how good they were, and it was a way of judging others who didn't quite live up to their standards. And so they asked Jesus, well, how come your guys aren't doing this? Your disciples, why don't they? Listen to how Jesus responded to them. Jesus replied, "You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. For he wrote, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas as commands from God.'" Okay, now this is a strong response, and he's talking to like the spiritually elite. These are like the uppity ups, and he pulls no punches, and he makes it really clear that his concern isn't about adherence to man-made rules. His concern is with the condition of the heart. He says, hey, listen, Pharisees and teachers of the law, you may appear to be like seeking after God and honoring him with your words and your outward action, but your heart is nowhere near where he is. It's kind of like he's saying, listen, you're feeling good because you're serving him cookies, but he sees the worms that are hidden underneath it. And we got to hear that today. Because as we talk about serving, it is possible that we go out and we live lives of service, but our hearts are still far from the people we serve and far from the God that we say we follow. And so I want us to dive into this principle of serving. And as we do, the very first thing we have to look at is that it has to start with Jesus. Okay? Because if we want to serve with our hearts in the right place, and really, if we want to do anything in life and have our hearts in the right place, it always has to start with Jesus. And that's why for the last 2 weeks, we've looked at intentionally and consistently making time to be with God. We've talked about the forgiveness of God. And it's because when we put ourselves in the presence of God, when we experience the forgiveness of God, it changes us and it changes our hearts. And I'll tell you, if you struggle with wanting to serve, or maybe you do serve, but you feel resentful afterwards, then we got to start with Jesus and looking not just at his words, but also at the life that he lived. And it's with that in mind that I want us to go to chapter 10 in the book of Mark. And we're going to start at verse 42, okay? And what I'll tell you is, prior to where we're picking up, here's what had happened. In verses 33 through 34, Jesus had just told his disciples, listen, guys, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to be unfairly tried, I'm going to be betrayed, and then I'm going to be killed, and 3 days later, I'm going to rise again. He lays out what's going to happen to him. He talks about, this is how my kingdom is going to unfold. And now, we don't know how his disciples respond to that. But what we do know is the very next thing that's recorded in the Bible after that is what we're about to read. And it's a conversation that happens with two brothers that are his disciples. It's James and John, they're brothers. And it says that they go up to Jesus and they say, hey, Jesus, can we ask you a favor? And Jesus, being a wise man, doesn't say yes. He says, what is it? And they say, hey, here's what we want. When you step into your kingdom, when you are sitting on your throne, can one of us sit on your right and can one of us sit on your left? Okay, as they're asking that, here's what they're basically asking. They're saying, listen, when you are in your highest spot, we want to be your people of honor. We want to be right beside you. Okay? Basically, they're saying in this ladder of life, like, can you put us a couple rungs up on the ladder? The rest of the disciples will be here. We'll be here. They're basically saying, we feel like we have earned this, and now we want to reap the rewards. And Jesus responds by saying, you guys don't know what you're asking for. And that's why we got to remember, but he just told them how his kingdom was going to unfold. He'd be betrayed, he'd be beaten, he'd be lied about, he'd go under false accusations and be killed. He's like, you guys don't understand what you're asking for. He's like, are you ready to drink this bitter cup that I'm about to drink? And in their ignorance, I got to think, because they're still thinking earthly kingdom. They're like, we're ready for it, okay? But what it says next is, it says the other disciples hear this request. And as they hear this request, they become indignant. Okay, they get really mad. Like, how dare you ask to be put up here above us? And that's where we're going to pick up, because I want us to hear what Jesus says to them. We're going to be in Mark chapter 10, verse 42. It's the New Living Translation. So Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man, that's how people referred to Jesus. For even the Son of Man, Jesus came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is Jesus saying, you guys, our lives should not be about being served. They should be about serving others. And he says, listen, I know that's not how this world works. In this world, what you do is you perform and then you reap the benefits of that. Like you get power and then you lord it over others. You make them serve you. But Jesus is saying, that's not the Jesus way of life. He says, you'll be different. He says, if you want to lead, then you'll choose to be a servant. And here's the thing, servant isn't just someone who serves, that's their full-time vocation. You're not a part-time servant, you're a full-time servant. It's something that you do all the time. And he says, just in case you don't get it, if you want to be like number one, you really want to be powerful, then don't just choose to be a servant, choose to be a slave. Servants expected pay. Slaves just did it because that was their call. And I don't know what you think, but I'm guessing as they heard those words, it didn't sound super appealing. And I can say that because I know for me personally, I would guess for you, that still doesn't sound appealing. Because it's so easy to think, I shouldn't have to do that. I deserve better. Let someone else play that role. It's my turn to be served. And I have to believe that they were thinking that too. And that's why Jesus ended it by saying, remember, even I, God in the flesh, I came to serve. And I'm going to serve all the way until my death, all the way up until the cross. And I'll tell you, those words, they are hard for us to hear because our natural human bend is to want others to serve us. That's how we're wired. It's a broken piece within all of us, that we feel our desires and our wants are more important than others. And our human tendency is to feel that we have the right to things and we have the right to be served. But Jesus flipped that on its head. And he says, we shouldn't be about climbing up the ladder so that we can be served. We're supposed to look down and not just see the people who need to be served, but be willing to go down and join them and serve them. And if we truly want to follow Jesus, we can't do it from up here looking down. We have to choose to step down and serve. And that can be a hard pill to swallow. But it's what Jesus taught, and it's what he lived. And if we want to follow him, we have to choose to live that same way. And that's why the only way we can truly serve with the right heart is we have to start with Jesus. And not just the words that he spoke, but by looking at the life that he lived. Because his entire life revolved around that. And when we look at how he served us and what he gave in order for us to be his followers, it should compel us to want to serve. And if you're here like saying, yep, I know Jesus, I know what he's done, some of us can be like, yep, I feel compelled to serve. If you're here just checking out Jesus, or if you're watching online and you're checking out Jesus, or even if you know Jesus, there's still times like, well, I still don't quite feel compelled. Now, I want you to think of the second point. And here's what it is. The plain and simple truth is, when we serve, we come alive. And if you've been around here, you've heard me say it, and the reason I say it is because it's true. And the best way I can think to share it is by sharing a story. Again, it was before I was a pastor. It was at a previous church that our family attended. We were in a community group. And that community group wasn't just a group that we gathered with for one day of the week. They were the people we did life with. They were couples that we grew to enjoy as we studied the Bible together, and we started vacationing and camping. We did all kinds of stuff. But it's funny because if you ask our kids what one of their favorite memory that we have with those people, it won't be the camping trips or the vacations or those. It'll be a day where they had to go serve. And I remember it was a Saturday, and it was our church had said, we're going to just serve our city. And the city, we built a reputation, or I guess we built a relationship with them where when we said we'd serve, they knew we would. So they committed. What they did is they sent garbage trucks. We had 20 garbage trucks, and they said, listen, we'll send you to parts of this town that need to be cleaned up. We'll give you these trucks. Will you fill them? And we showed up in force and in mass. And so we're cleaning up, and we were on this one part of town where it was a flop house. It was a house that had been abandoned, and homeless and drugs and everything were in there. And during the day, nobody was in there, okay? And the city said, you guys can clean it up. And so, of course, we didn't send our kids in there. They cleaned up the outside part of this lot. It was a big old lot. But one of the things that happened is when the people left that house, they had a freezer outside that had been locked up. And there was food in that freezer, meat in that freezer. And it had been locked and it had been frozen. But when they quit living there and they didn't take their stuff with them, electricity went off and all that meat went bad. And obviously someone had pried it open to try and see what was in there. And when you opened it, it smelled like death. It was the most disgusting thing ever. There were feral cats living in there. There was feces. It was everything. It was a disgusting place. And that Saturday, when we told our kids, we're going to go serve, they're like, is this really what we're going to do with our Saturday? By the end of the day, they used over a garbage truck to haul all the garbage out of that place. At the end of the day, as we looked at the lot and the way it had been transformed, our kids, instead of being like, this is how we spend our Saturday, our kids are like, this is how we spend our Saturday. They were so on fire for what they'd done. And the funny thing is, they still look back and like, that just felt good. And here's what I'll tell you. The reason I share the story is doing good feels good. You literally come alive when you serve. And the thing is, that shouldn't surprise us because that's exactly what Jesus told us. He told us that he came so that we would have life and life to the full, and then he taught us how to achieve that, and he was the perfect example of how to live it. And part of that is serving. And if you look at it, science is now proving what he said to be true because there's all kinds of studies that show when you serve others, your body releases these natural chemicals called endorphins. Okay? They're a natural chemical that brings you pleasure. When you do things that feel good, endorphins are released. Studies show that when you serve others, your body releases endorphins. And in fact, it shows that when you serve others, your body releases more endorphins for that when you do things to serve yourself. It feels good to do good. That's the way God created us. It does not surprise me. And it shouldn't surprise you. And that's why as a church, we're constantly going to give you ways that you can serve. It doesn't matter if it's grabbing a flag for Mexico. It doesn't matter if it's helping the Selah Academy. Or it doesn't matter if it's coming and serving on facilities or all the different ways. We're constantly going to do it. And I'm going to warn you, we're going to try and give you better ways to do it because once a month, we're going to do what we just call Minute on Missions. Those partnerships that we have with people, we're going to bring them up here and let them share. If you want to help change this community, if you want to love and serve others, here's a chance. There are great opportunities out there. And it's an incredible win-win because you receive even though you're giving yourself away. And the hard part is the only way you can experience it is if you try it. And that's one of the things I love about this Red Letter Challenge is this week it is going to challenge you over and over to find different ways to serve people. It's going to ask you to do it as an individual. But then I'm going to tell you, it's going to ask you to do it as a community group. And I think about our community group, and we got busy families going all different directions. If you can't make it happen this week, don't give up. Serving is something that we should build into just the routine and the rhythm of our community groups. That's part of what we should be doing. And serving can look lots of different ways, but the commonality they're all going to have is it will take an investment. But here's what I'll tell you. If you make the investment, it'll pay dividends. And that's not why we do it. That's just one of the blessings of serving. And I'd encourage you, if you haven't done it, just take that step. And really that leads to the very next thing is one of the benefits of serving, and this is going to sound like really kind of new agey or Zen, but trust me, it's biblical. We find ourselves when we focus on and serve Jesus. And again, I recognize that uses trendy language, which can scare people. Right now, you may not know it, but the fastest growing genre of books out there are self-help. In the last decade, the number of self-help books have doubled, okay? And there's always one on the New York Times bestseller list or more. And if you look at those books, what they'll say is, they'll say that, if you want to find yourself, if you want to find your best self, then it's about self-focus, self-care. And the chorus you hear over and over and over is self, and a focus on self. But I'll tell you, that's not the advice that Jesus gives us. He gives us the exact opposite. And that shouldn't surprise us because Jesus has always been countercultural. He says, guys, if you want to find yourselves and who you were created to be, you can't do it by focusing on yourself. You have to do it by focusing and following Jesus. And a part of that following is serving. And while the world tells you to be self-centered and to be a consumer, Jesus tells us we're not here just to consume, we're here to contribute. And we're here to serve others. And the more we live according to what Jesus taught and how he lived, the more we'll understand and experience just who he did create us to be. And that we get to experience that life that he created us to experience. And so what I'll tell you is, it starts with serving. And as you serve, there are sometimes you'll serve and you'll just be like, okay, yeah, that was good. But there are sometimes that you serve that it will literally light you up. And it's because God has built us all different, and he's placed different gifts in each and every one of us. And here's what I'll tell you. When you use the gifts that God has built inside of you in a way that serves others, it not only gives him glory, it is going to bring you life. It is going to light you up in ways that other things won't. One of the reasons I loved working at Selah Junior High when I was one of the principals is there was a group of people who liked junior high kids. That's not the case for everybody, okay? I mean, there's a lot of people like anything but junior high. In Selah, we had teachers who were like, these are my kids. It brought them alive to work with them. There are things out there that are just waiting to light you up. But it's going to start with your willingness to serve. And if you aren't sure what those things are, then the final thing we got to look about with serving is just get out there and do it. Get out and start serving. And if you don't know where or how, then just open your eyes, because there are tons of needs that are not being met, and we are the people that are supposed to meet them. Go out and serve and see what lights you up. And if you aren't sure about where to start, here's what I'll tell you. I think lots of times people are like, I'm looking for the perfect place to serve. It's going to fit my schedule. It's going to use my gifts. I am looking for, there is no perfect place to serve. Look to the perfect God who called you to serve, and then be open. Take time, pray, dig into his word. Say, God, I want to see how and where you want to use me. Then open your eyes and look for a need. We constantly are talking about places that you can serve. I'll tell you, part of that is because our church, it is a community-driven organization. It's run by volunteers. You may not notice it, but over the last month, a couple different times, we're adding more chairs. None of y'all like to sit in the front middle. I understand that. But like we were running, we needed more space because y'all don't like to sit next to each other. And that's not because of COVID. That's just how you guys are wired. But we're putting in more chairs to make more space. Funny thing is, we can't do that in children. Our children's are starting to just kind of burst at the seams. Sometimes we got 60 kids. Maybe you're called to go help in children's. Maybe you're like, no way, no how. Maybe you're the person who needs to come help out in the office on weekends. Maybe it's our tech people, our worship team, our facilities teams. There's all kinds of ways to do it. And I don't just bring that up because as a church we need help, but I bring it up because when you serve, it will light you up. And if the first thing you try doesn't, then try something different. It's why we talk about Love Inc. or Habitat for Humanity or Young Life or all the different ways you can serve the food bank that's going to be opening up. They're going to need people to work there. The people that are made to fill those needs are sitting right here. And sometimes it's just taking the bold step of saying, I'm going to try it. And I don't say that to guilt anybody, because guilt doesn't bring change, but Jesus does. And if you look to Jesus and start there, I guarantee you'll see that in some way, somehow, he's calling you to serve. And when you step into that need, it will light you up. And sometimes the only thing we got to do is we just got to start by asking, what can I do to help? It's funny because it was a couple months ago, we looked at that question. We gave out these little Klingons that said, what can I do to help? And I told you the week before, we're going to have a life-changing question, a family-changing question. And this plain and simple question is, what can I do to help? We talked about the power that has, that if you would ask the people of your family, what can I do? And then move on it, it has the power to bring change. And that's not just in our families, it's in our communities. And here's what I love. I've walked into people's houses, into buildings, into offices. I see these little things on their phones, on their computer screens, on their windows. It's just a reminder. If you need one, we still got more out there. But ask yourself this week, what can I do to help? I love in the Bible, there's spots where it talks about Jesus would see the people and it would talk about his heart. His heart would hurt because he would see people and he said they were like sheep without a shepherd. He knew they needed something and his heart would be moved, and then he filled that need. As followers of Jesus, we're supposed to do that same thing. And I think sometimes we can say, but my schedule or my time or that person really doesn't deserve my help. Like, I work hard, I've saved hard, I've done this, I've done all the right things, and that person, they've squandered everything they got. They don't deserve my help. You don't know their story. But more importantly, quit looking at them and look at Jesus. Because here's what I'll tell you. Jesus had the opportunity. He could have said, you know, God, I got it perfect up here. Dad, I don't need to go down there. They don't deserve my help. You gave them the perfect place to live with everything they had, and they squandered it, and they made a mess. I'm not going. That's not what he did. He gave a gift that we can never pay back. And he gave it to us when we didn't deserve it. And our job is not just to receive that and then hold tight to it, but to share it with others. And the way we do is by going out and serving and loving people right where they're at, even when they don't deserve it, because we recognize we were given a gift we don't deserve. Anybody remember the worm story that I'd shared before? Okay, not many of you. I can reuse stories. That's good. Okay. How about this? Here's the more important thing. I don't care if you remember the worm story. Anybody remember why I taught it last time? Couple. I taught it because I talked about the difference between submission and surrender. I submitted to my mom's request. She said, don't you dare give those cookies to somebody who doesn't want them. They all begged for the cookies. They just didn't know what they were asking for. I submitted to what she wanted, but I did not surrender to her will or to her heart. I was more set on my heart and what I wanted. We can do the same thing with service. We can go out and serve, and we can just give a minimal. We can even give a lot. But if our heart's not in it, they're not going to see Jesus. They're going to see us. And they're not supposed to see us. You guys, a lot of times when it comes to service, it's just our willingness to submit. And don't think of it as submitting it to someone else. Think of submitting to God, the one who gave it. And now our chance is to give back. If we want to follow Jesus and we want to experience life and life to the full, service is a part of the way we do that. I love how the Apostle Paul expressed it in Philippians chapter 2. Just listen to this. It's verses 5 through 8. You must. He was writing to people in Philippi, but these words are for us. We must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross. He didn't have to look down. He didn't have to come down, but he did. And those words from Paul to people then are for us here today. Living that way, it sounds scary, but here's what God promises. Doing it, we won't lose our life. It's where we'll find it. But it starts with the willingness to serve. God made us to serve something larger than ourselves. It's his kingdom. And when we do, we'll find life. This week, you're going to be challenged to do that. Don't just read the words and move on. Take the challenge and experience life. Pray with me. Father God, My prayer is that we won't just listen to these words, my words. We won't just read your words. That our eyes will truly be drawn to you. That what we'll see is that the life you lived and the life that you willingly gave that we can read about in the Bible, it's not just a story we're supposed to know. It's a truth we're supposed to experience. Father, my prayer is that if we've understood that in the past, that we would be drawn to it in a new way, where it would come alive, and that we wouldn't just know the stories, but that it would change our heart, that our actions wouldn't just be things that we do because we feel like we have to, but we're compelled to because we want to. Let us love people well. Lord, if there are people here who have never understood your love for them, my prayer is today is that they will hear that they will feel that, and that they will move on that. That they would understand the first thing to life and life to the full comes with a relationship with you. If you're here today and you want to experience that, here'd be my thing. I don't want you to raise your hand. I don't want you to do anything. I want you to come and talk to me after service. Email me, call me, text me. I don't care. Text someone else who knows Jesus. You're not just supposed to walk that alone. We're here together to walk it together. Father God, let us be people who walk together, and that as we do, they see you. I pray these things in the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Amen.